over to him. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate the organizers of the Degrowth Conference on the timeliness of the event and also the participants here, and I want to wish you success in this matter, in these very difficult times for nature and also, therefore, for the human being. Survivals of a Magic World, Maria Sabina. Maria Sabina asked that indigenous woman with small eyes and cracked face, a thin girl. She was wearing a huipil embroidered with embroideries with blue and red overtones, sitting at the waiting room of the bus terminal in the city. She didn't seem to be surprised by my presence. I identified her through a recent photo where she was barefoot, toothless, with braids and white hairs and the hands of a hard-working woman who has been a peasant. She was working outside of her adobe house and in the Fortín Hill in Cuautla de Jiménez, in the Mazateca mountain range. There is a world beyond ours, an invisible world, a faraway world, but also near to us, near us. That's where God lives, where the dead live, the spirits and the saints. It's a world where everything has happened, where everything is known. That world speaks. It's got its own language. I repeat what it says to me. The sacred mushroom take me back and forth to the world where everything is known. It is them, the sacred mushroom, are the ones who talk in a way that I'm able to understand. I ask them and they respond. When I come back from my trip, I say what they have told me, what they have showed me. Maria Sabina, I asked again in that bus terminal. With distrust, she looked at me. Yes, Maria Aurora, her daughter. She nodded. She said, let's go. Betty, my wife, and I put Maria Sabina, put her in, Eduardo Valladares, and her translator, Juan Garcia Carrera, in our car, and we drove off for a long journey to the south of the city. It was 10 p.m. on Friday, February 25th, 1983. We were heading to the National Institute of Cardiology. I didn't know when the trip with her had started. If it was when I heard her name for the first time, related to her chants sung during initiation rites to ecstasies, or when Betty and I were driving past the Palmas Avenue when I saw on a newspaper the news that Maria Sabina was dying in poverty. What a shame, I said to my wife. The greatest poet and visionary of the Americas is dying in misery. I called the reporter, and Garcia Carrera called me back the following day to tell me that he had Maria Sabina on a taxi coming from Oaxaca to see me. By 11 o'clock, we entered the institute with her. When we got out of the car and we went to the emergency room, Maria Sabina explored the vast space of the hospital, a little bit afraid. On the way to the examination room, she seemed to go through invisible doors and bridges. In front of her bed, she bowed with her hands and her head before going to bed. What is she doing? She said, well, she's talking to the medical instruments, to the bed, and to every instrument that it's going to be used in her inside. She lives in a ritual world where every presence, every movement, every step makes sense. The institute is for ill patients. Maria Sabina is suffering from poverty and old age. Those are ailments that cannot be healed here. The doctor said, you will have to take her elsewhere after examining her. Maria Sabina, the great priest of hallucinogen mushrooms, had been born on July 21st, 34 in Rio Santiago, a ranch near Huautla de Jimenez. But she ignored the exact date of her birth, and she could only recall that once her mother said to her that she had come to the world on the morning on the day when they celebrate the Magdalena Virgin. None of my ancestors knew their age, she affirmed. Maria Concepcion, her mother, and Crisanto Feliciano, her father, were very old when she was born. Mariana, 2 years younger, was her only sister. The family inhabited a shack with mud walls and cane sticks roof. Her great-grandparents had been healers. Her father had passed away before she turned 3. Neither the healers, nobody was able to heal her, she said. Her maternal grandparents were very poor, and her mother took her daughters to live with them in Cerro Fortín. Manuel Cosme, her grandfather, was a peasant. Maria Estefania, her grandmother, would grow corn and bean. They would also raise silkworm. Maria Sabina and her Sister Mariana didn't go to school because they had to work. They didn't even learn to speak and write in Spanish. They would only express themselves using the Mazateca language. According to Maria Sabina, one day of her childhood would be as follows. She would wake up at dawn. When the first rooster sang, she was already drinking pinole water sweetened with piloncillo just to heal her cold and hunger. Her mother would make tortillas, and her grandmothers would work and her grandparents were peasants, but the infancy marked by hunger changed drastically when she discovered hallucinogenous mushrooms. When Maria Sabina was 7 and Mariana 5, walking around the hill, they saw some spots around the herb and stones. They were fungus, they were mushrooms. They talked to them as though they were people. They were hungry, they ate them. The sisters started to have visions. Maria Sabina, in her life, tells that experience. Mariana and myself would take care of our hens in the hills, so they wouldn't be the victims of the fox and of the eagle. So we were sitting under a tree when all of a sudden I was able to see near me, within my arm's reach, several eyes, several mushrooms, the same mushrooms that Juan Manuel, the wise man, had eaten. I knew them well. My hands took one and then another. I looked them very closely. And I know, like, they're going to make me sing beautifully, I said. I recalled that my grandparents used to talk about those mushrooms with lots of respect. This is why I knew they were not evil. I didn't hesitate and put them in my mouth and chew them. Their taste was not nice. On the opposite, they were bitter. They had the taste of root, of earth. I ate them up, and Mariana, my sister, after watching me, did the same. The discovery of the magic powers of mushrooms had begun. In the years after, whenever we felt hungry, we would eat mushrooms. Not only did we feel our stomach full, but also our spirit was happy. Mushrooms would ask us pray to God, for He would make us suffer so much. We would tell Him that we were always hungry, that we felt cold. I didn't know whether the mushrooms were good or bad, or a reality, but I felt they spoke to me. After eating them, I would hear voices coming from another world. The tears would go down our cheeks as though we were crying for the poverty we were living in. initiated in the magical power of the saint children, Maria Sabina and her sister continued to eat them in the hills, and their parents started to find them lying or kneeling down on the floor. What have you done? They would ask them. They would take us back home in their arms, and we kept laughing, singing, or weeping. They never told us off. They never battered us for having eaten mushrooms, because they know it's not good to tell somebody off after eating those things, because that might lead you to mixed feelings, and it's probable that they might feel like they're going crazy. Maria Sabina, little by little, came to realize that her words were beautiful, and that when discovering the language of mushrooms, she was discovering her own. During that time, Emilio Cristino, her uncle, got sick, and her grandmother brought the wise man, Juan Manuel, one night to heal him. I saw how Juan Manuel would light up the candles and talk to the owners of the hills and the owners of the springs. I saw how he would give out the mushrooms, counting them by two, handing them out to everybody present, including the one who was sick. Later on, in total darkness, he would talk and talk and talk. His language was beautiful. I liked it. At times, the wise man would sing and sing and sing. I wouldn't understand his words exactly, but I liked them. It was a language that, without understanding it, I felt attracted to it. It was a language that talked about stars, animals, and other things that were unknown for me. The mushrooms had made Juan Manuel sing. Maria Sabina then knew that those mushrooms were sacred. They would heal diseases and give wisdom. It was old medicine for their people. She knew that they have to be treated with respect. In the following rain season, when mushrooms were abundant, the sisters ate them again. Maria Sabina learned to see and talk to the spirits of the dead and those alive. She started thinking, as in a Christian tradition, that the mushrooms were like God. Deep inside, I feel they're like my relatives, she would say, as though they were my parents, my blood. Therefore, I was born with a fate, being a wise woman. There was syncretism of indigenous and Catholic traditions, and she expressed it. She said, those children are the blood of Christ. When Mazatecos talked about what we do it in a quiet voice in order not to pronounce the name that we have in Mazateco, Digi Chok. We call them little things, or the little saints. That's what our ancestors would call them. In their discovery of mushrooms, Maria Sabina did not imagine that the Aztecs had called them Tionavacatl, the flesh of God, according to Motolinia, and that the poets of Nahuatl language would call them intoxicating flowers, and that sculptors had represented the god Xochipilli, seeing visions and hearing, possibly under the effects of mushrooms, Psilocybe quastecorum. Bernardino de Sahagún had described them as a banquet for the merchants. Some others didn't sing, they just sat and stayed there, thoughtful, and some would see visions, like they were dying and they cried. Some others would see that a virus beast would eat them, and some others would see other visions. Heir of a magical tradition, Maria Sabina compared mushrooms like children and birds without losing sight of their cleansing and healing properties. She would say, I see them as children, as clowns, as children with violins, children with trumpets, children who sing and dance around me, tender children like flowers, like growing flowers, like blossoming flowers, children who suck evil blood, the bird that sucks illness, the birds who are wise, the cleansing figure, the healing figure. I sing to the sick. These are my medicinal leaves. These are the healing leaves. I am the lightning woman. I am the wise woman who knows about herbs. Jesus Christ, give me your singing. Maria Sabina was admitted in the general hospital, for some studies, even though I knew her thoughts about the magical origin of diseases and her ambiguous feelings about Western medicine when the foreigners were trying to heal her. Those who say who are wise people in medicine give me medicine. I don't pay attention to them. The truth is that I don't want to take this foreign medicine because I have my own wet medicine. When Betty Jo went to visit her in the room that she shared with 8 more people in the general hospital, she was sitting on a chair. The doctor gave me a list of her ailments: artery thickening, respiratory insufficiency, moderate malnutrition, and parasitosis. But the biggest cause of her ailments was her age. However, the presence of the shamana in the general hospital was a huge commotion. Patients, doctors, and nurses realized that Western medicine could not heal her. They asked for her help. Maria Sabina one night went to my house. When she walked into the living room, my daughters grabbed her hands. She was wearing a white huipil with pink and blue ribbons on the leaves and an embroidery of a bird. As a good indigenous woman, she brought presents: coffee from Huaca de Jimenez and the cloth that she had embroidered herself. Sitting at the table eating pasta, she looked at Tarzan, her dog, black shepherd. He's a person. He has a sight. She said the problem with dogs is that then they die on us. And staring at the masks hanging from the wall, she felt interested in some I had for the Jackie Easter ritual. And she said, I want to buy that one off of you, pointing at one that had belonged to a shaman. By the way, now that we talk about mushrooms, I don't trip anymore because I'm way too old and I'm scared. I can just stay on the way. There are demons on the way. I've said it. I have never seen the demons, even though to get where I should, I have to walk past the dominions of death. I can walk down and look around the shades, and that's how I can get to the place where illnesses are, underneath the roots and the water, mud and stones. Sometimes I just go up the hills and up to the clouds to get to where I have to be, to where I can see God, where I can see Benito Juarez. That's where everything is known and about everyone, because everything is clear there. I hear voices, they talk to me. That's the voice of the kid that asks me. The voice that lives of the God that lives in them comes into my body. Impressed with the description of her shamanistic trip through the supernatural regions, I started playing the record of the Mazatec Indians of Mexico about mushrooms that had been recorded in Huautla de Jimenez on the night of the 21st, 22nd of June in 1956. When she heard her own voice, she looked at me with her deep eyes, looking at me as a bird with a supernatural look. She paid attention when she heard her singing her old song. She said to me that she had never heard it before. I don't know, when she was arrested by the federal agents in Cuautla because of the hippie thing, she had said that she had the record and the record player that Huaso had given away to her. The impression that I had at that point in time is that her past, she was not familiar with her past anymore, as though it had happened during a trance and she were two different people. The Maria Sabina, who was 50-something years old during the mushroom night, and the present one, who was 80-something years old. They were both fragile creatures before the divine power that spoke about the mushrooms. I'm a weeping woman. I'm a spirit woman. I'm Jesus Christ. I'm a macho saint. I'm a male saint, a female saint. I'm an atmospheric woman. The nostalgic singing continued throughout the night, where she was meditating around the word that she had said 30 years ago and about the language that was on her body, about the revelations that she had expressed during that rite. No translation was able to convey in any language the mystery of the voice of Maria Sabina singing in ecstasies those songs emerging from an old sacred ceremony. Gordon Wasson, who is in his ethnomycological search in Mexico, had discovered her, and I quote, she said, well, she represented the nocturnal rite of the mushrooms 4 times in 1955 and 56, according to him, in a non-recorded session after eating the mushrooms and lying down on petates. The lady, with a capital letter, when she put out the last candle, while the moonlight was illuminating the altar on the table, she started screaming quietly and then in a more loudly. Then she started singing, and her singing continued intermittently throughout the night. Maria Sabina's voice was not strong, but in her primitive voice there was certainty and resonance that imposed themselves. During the night, she went to the terrace, just ready to come back on her knees towards the altar on the table, her hands on her shoulders, with her open palms. She would sing a song that sounded like an old song, whose musical phrases expressed an indescribable type of complaining tender. At those moments, the lady would start to converse as though she was invoking the spirits, as though the Holy Spirit would speak through the mushrooms. We heard the name of Christ that she pronounced with one more letter, Christus, she would say. Never did we imagine that her poetic instrument was the Mazateco language. During one long moment, we found ourselves in the darkness, the deepest darkness, where she was singing and her daughter was dancing. We recalled one of the culminating moments when Maria Sabina started singing and telling poetry, saying Chuk Ha. And then she addressed to the Almighty to attract his attention on his demands. Well, now they're telling me I'm short of time, so the story about her death, I will share it later. Well, I've been interrupted, and it's just one more page, but, you know, the part that's coming up is her death. Okay, so I'm going to finish. Okay. Because I'm ashamed I'm late. I'm running later. The record of her singing during those nights gave me the impression of the religiosity of Maria Sabina, which came from a Mexican tradition and rooted in magic. I felt like her movements were accompanying her singing in a similar manner to the drum sound of the huicholes during the drum fiesta, when they become an instrument for the flight of the incarnated soul. That night I showed Maria Sabina photos of peyote and of the shamans who sing about the mythical origins of life. I also know a Mazateco tale about the formation of the sun and the moon, but she kept silent. On the record, the voice of the chamana, she gave us back the present, probably when she heard her voice singing and she recalled her efforts to make this divine spirit to earth. Maria Sabina recalled the circumstances of the ceremony, and she said the important thing was the rite, and that her voice has been recorded as the greatest testimony of any sacred mushroom ceremony ever. Later I showed the book to Maria Sabina, Les Champignons hallucinogènes Mexicaines, by a French writer, and in one of those photos, Maria Sabina was consuming mushrooms with her son. We see her staring at Aurelio, a dark-skinned guy wearing a white shirt. On his left hand, he had a white plate full of mushrooms. Kneeled down, his son was looking at the mushroom on her right-hand side. With the right-hand side, Maria Sabina is about to take the mushroom to her mouth. Maria Sabina, when I showed another photo, she saw herself passing the mushrooms through the copal smoke. Aurelio and her in another photo appear in ecstasy. The priestess totally in ecstasy with her son near a jar of water and the Santo Niño de Atocha image and the baptism of Christ in the Jordan River. All of a sudden, as though in a trance, she said to us, "That's Aurelio, my son." I had not seen him for a long time. She said it as though her dead son was present on the photo, as though he really would be looking at her from the petate, from the image on the paper. She says that in the course of that session she prayed for divine help. "What happened to your son?" I asked. She said he had been assassinated, but he's alive. Where? He's there, on the paper, on the photo. As though getting out of a dream, coming out of a dream, she's explained to us what happened 30 years ago. Aurelio was sad. That night she said, I know I'm going to get lost. And yes, the son of her neighbor Dolores killed him for a debt of 50 pesos. Maria Sabina at that age did not eat mushrooms. She was lacking forces and was afraid not to be able to come back. She was not bitter because of that. She said that mushrooms had taught her everything. They had shown her weaknesses, strength, life itself. Is there anything else I can ask them to do? And she said, well, the last time I ate mushrooms, I went up to heaven. God said to me, what are you looking for? Stop eating them. Otherwise, you're going to stay in the middle of the journey and you're not going to be able to go back. Never again. What else? If they taught me the names of rivers and mountains as an act of faith, and that's how she healed. I always did good and never evil. Then she went back to Huautla. She celebrated her last birthday on a Social Security hospital bed in Oaxaca. She had malnutrition. She spent all her life with hunger. She was missing her house and her chicken and her magic world in the Mazateca mountains. She was happy because her nose and mouth hemorrhage had stopped. She didn't hold a grudge against anyone who had robbed her of her savings, 10,000 pesos. She was sorry not to be able to inherit anything to her family. Authorities of all levels and of all times had robbed all of that. She says, that's going to take me to the grave. I don't want for anything to be written about me. I want to save my family. We're covered by poverty. Her obsession was that her house would become a Catholic temple. Maria Sabina, mother of 10 children, that she had with her husband Serapio Martinez and Marcial Carrera, also expressed her will for her grandson to be the heir of the secret of hallucinogenous mushrooms, because he had discovered them 10 years before. Wisdom cannot be inherited. Wisdom is inborn. Wisdom cannot go to my children because nobody teaches the language that I was taught. Maria Magdalena Sabina Garcia passed away from thrombosis, lung thrombosis, hepatic cirrhosis, and in the intensive care unit of the Social Security Hospital in the city of Oaxaca at 2:45 on November 22nd, 1985. Supposedly at the age of 92. She was living behind her Perfecto Gomez, her third husband, with whom she had married some years before by a divine mandate of God. He was around 80 years old. She was 87 then. The small mushrooms had told me what it was like when I was in my mother's womb. I can see myself as an illuminated fetus, and I know that when I was born, the main beings were present. So was the heart of Christ there. In her last hours, she had been unconscious. She had been kept alive through artificial ventilation. The room was dark. The place was not cold. There was no reason to be afraid. You have to approach the death. We're closer to them than those people alive who deceive us. That's what she expressed before she passed away. I can't see my face. I don't see it. I can feel the peace in the world, but I feel sad. I see people that I met when I was a child, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my parents. In her life, she had given instructions for her wake and burial. The day that I die, we'll do what our habits dictate. We're going to break a rooster's neck who will have to die together with me. The spirit of the rooster will walk me and it will sing 4 days after I'm buried. So my spirit will wake up, and it'll go to the realm of death. And I will need some water next to my head, water that I will be taking with me so I don't get too thirsty on my way to the kingdom of the dead. In my coffin, you have to put 7 quintonil and pumpkin seeds in a cloth bag. That'll be the food that I will bring with me so I don't feel hungry on my way. The women who will go to my wake will have to make mole, and with the mole with the meat of the rooster just sacrificed. And if I have sacred candles that are leftovers from the times that I worked, put them next to my body. Dress me up with a clean huipil and my best rebozo. In my hands, put a cross. Thank you.